Because I think leadership isn't just public spaces. I think we think about it publicly, but I think integral leadership is in private.
Welcome to the Crucible Project Podcast. The Crucible Project is a nonprofit organization committed to creating a world of men and women who live with integrity, grace, and courage, helping them to fulfill their God-given purpose. This podcast will discuss important and sometimes difficult topics while delivering practical life applications with men and women who are currently practicing this work. We are igniting Christ-like change in men and women through experiences of radical honesty and grace.
Hello and welcome to the Crucible Project Podcast. My name is Tim Rush and today we're talking about leadership. And this morning I am joined by Kim Rush, my wife extraordinaire. Kim has an education in social work and missions. At the age of 18, she joined a mission internship program that sent her to live in Russia for a year. She's lived in Mexico for almost 12 years. And besides that, she's been involved in ministry in the Philippines and in South America, as well as Australia. She is impacting the world all over. So Kim, I'm so grateful that you would be with us today. Is there anything else that I should add as far as resume goes?
I honestly can't remember exactly what you said, but we have 3 kids, and a lot of my time and energy went to their raising, their education. I think that's a big part of my resume, is just being a mom, in addition to all the other stuff that you mentioned.
Yeah, I think we have been married for 25 years, and that is not in small part because of your grace in our relationship, and that you have kids that are 23, 20, and 20, dedicated to their education, being a homeschool mom for over half of those education years. That is a big deal.
Yeah, it's funny. I think that when I started doing that, I wanted to do it, the homeschooling portion, I wanted to do it to make our ministry life possible. And then when we moved back to the U.S., I wanted to do it for the good of the kids, but I mean, this will play out in the way that I viewed myself. I didn't hold that job in as high of a regard for my personal identity as I did the missions job that we had. And so I had some wrestling around that, but came through it finding great value in that offering. It's not a space of unsung like honor and praise. I think a lot of people are supportive of that. I think that I grew up in a space where not very many people homeschooled. The few that I knew, they probably took great stances of distance from all of society, which is not what I was about with it. And so I worried about what people thought with us doing it, and that played into some of my own contentment with it. And it was a unique time for us. There was a lot of other things about life that were jostled and tangled in parts of those years. So
Right. And if I could throw in a quick plug here for the Crucible, if there's anybody listening that hasn't done the Crucible Project initial retreats, I have to say we started this journey in 2012 when our kids would have been 11, 8, and 8, and watching them grow up with emotional maturity, that I think a big part of it is because of what we were learning about ourselves and how to share that with our kids. Like, we just can't overstate the value of stepping into this work and staying involved in this work.
yeah, I think that's true for sure. The kids surprised me with the things that they were aware of about themselves that I would have not known and would never have wanted to admit, honestly, when I was younger. And so I feel in awe of that, of seeing not that their life will just be roses, but like the awareness that they have about themselves is far above where I was even in my 20s and they were in their teens, you know?
Yes. What should our audience know about you?
I mean, they'll know from hearing you that I'm married to Tim Rush. We have 3 kids. We live in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I grew up in California, and then we lived in Mexico for a long time with missions, and then moved back to Tulsa about 10 years ago. It was a hard landing for me here, and took a while for me to come into my own, and I'm kind of between established seasons of life. Like, the kids graduated, I was homeschooling them. I studied social work, and I did that, like, I would say on the side and woven throughout my time educating the kids and working with our church. And now I'm doing some ministry in the broader kingdom of God, and I travel travel some with Crucible and do a lot of leadership stuff with Crucible, and then I do pastoral care.
So this Crucible journey of yours began, I would say, maybe 2012-ish, when your husband went off to a Crucible initial weekend. And at that point, did you ever think that one day you would be a Crucible weekend leader?
I did not. No, I didn't really know very much about it. And Crucible was an organization focused on men's work at that time, too. So I didn't dream about it being possible at that time. I believe I went on a weekend with a partnering organization in 2015. And even then, it's not something I aspired to lead, but I thought that it was really powerful. And I wanted to support it happening in Mexico for women that we knew there. And so, like, wanting to help bring it about, for transformational work in Mexico is, I think, what drew me to it, to stepping into this pathway, I guess.
So how did you get drawn into what you're doing now?
Yeah, I think there's a variety of ways. Like, we lived in Tulsa by the time that I went to one of these weekends, and I wanted local community. I wanted women here to be able to experience it, as well as help get a project like that started in Mexico, partnering with other people. And here in Tulsa, I think my initial partnership with Crucible was to be able to lead groups for women that hadn't been through any kind of weekend work yet, but were wanting the same type of transformational spaces that some of their spouses were experiencing. So similar to what you and I had, these guys had gone through, and their wives were really interested in being able to step into this style of transformational work. And so I ended up getting coaching from one of the leaders in Crucible to help start up a project for women here. And I don't remember what your question was now, babe, but I mean, I'm passionate about this kind of thing. I think it fits well with my social work background. It feels similar to some of the ministry that we've done, but then the difference is just particular skill set that really dives into how we were formed, what are some of the painful experiences behind that, and then how did we grow around that in response. Yeah, it just feels like a very good fit for me. So I think I felt energized by being engaged in the groups, and I liked the changes that it brought about in my own life and the sense of community that I experienced by being involved in these spaces with other women. And then, Crucible for Women was started, I think, in 2019. There was a lot of changes within the organization soon after it got started. COVID happened. I feel like I was in the right place at the right time in a lot of ways to just step into wanting it to really grow and be sustainable for women. There were several women that were interested in that, and so then I was among them in this group helping it get started.
So you have a lot of just natural leadership gifts. How are those being used in what you're doing right now?
I think that the things that fit really well in this particular space for me are, like I said, related to some of my schooling with social work and ministry. And I think the nature of Crucible being a type of space where people are being transformed, the leaders included, I think my willingness to learn as I go and to be one of the first ones to try it out in an experiential way has helped me walk in leadership in this space. Then I think just being conscientious of other people, having some awareness of like people's strengths and weaknesses, what will energize some and what might deplete others. It just helps me to walk with people well. And then I have a pretty driven personality for things that I feel passionate about, not about house cleaning, really. That's not where my drive kicks in, but in other areas that make life better. And I hope to bring good to the world. Those are things that are really, that I feel passionate about. Then I find a lot of persistence in my spirit to keep going, to help those things be done well. I care about it being done in a way that is safe enough for people with a level of competence that instills trust in others. That's what I've got.
Yeah, I wish that people listening to this knew you, because there are things that I want to go back and unpack. Like, yeah, you're a very brave person. At 18, you moved to Perm, Russia, where you lived for a year as a missionary intern. And people who aren't brave don't do that. And the insights that you have into people from not just living in foreign countries, but I think that's a piece of it. Like you have learned how to learn about people that really matters. And I see that. You've mentioned some hard seasons, and I wonder if any of that experience walking through really hard things has made a difference in how you lead today.
Yeah, I actually think that has made a big difference in how I lead. When we still lived in Mexico and when we first learned about the Enneagram, we read, I think I read the Richard Rohr book that we were loaned by our friends James and Aaron, and I thought it was really helpful in knowing that people are coming from such different places, but I didn't really know where I fit in that book, and I guessed I was maybe a 1, which is a perfectionist type, but the one that I thought was the grossest and that I disliked reading about the most was the 3, which is called the achiever, the performer, or in some circles like the motivator. And so some of that fit my personality style or what I read about it, but also it didn't, I remember asking myself, maybe asking God, if my sense of self-worth and sense of being is super built around what I do, how would I know that to be true? It just feels like this job I have is a really good fit for me and I love it. How would I know that was true? And I feel like having that season and time and what felt like a really perfect fit unravel in surprising ways that we didn't want and we didn't plan was a way to dismantle some of that kind of shadowed drive about finding my sense of identity greatly in my doing. And the way that I think it helps in leadership now is just having walked to the awareness of that. Then, I don't think I'll ever be fully away from searching for my sense of meaning out of what I do, but I can recognize if my sense of identity has taken a blow or I feel shaky, then I try to look to have it filled in other ways instead of drawing people to myself and building something lasting that feels meaningful. It's like all of that stuff is really good, but if I try to hang my hat on it, I think it has like the cart before the horse in regards to what is most valuable, and then can really set up a sense of, it's a false sense of security in identity, but I think it even creates more of a false, like a front, putting on a show so that the thing, whatever the thing is that I'm working in looks good and feels good and seems reputable. But I think that it would be less authentic if that were the main focus.
I think it's fascinating that maybe it's just me. Maybe I think in outline form, and so that's what I want. But I think that this is just true about people, that whenever I ask about what makes you a better leader, what I want to hear are 3 basic steps that then I can replicate and make myself a better leader. But instead, you're unpacking your identity. And I feel like that is the right way to go about it, not looking for 3 basic steps, but it's really, where is your identity? What is your identity? And letting your leadership come from what's just true about you, not having to put on a show about that. So what was going on that helped you take off the sense of who you wanted to project versus who this is really you?
I don't know. It's like I have to put on that question and think about what. I'm aware of the things that felt really hard that were going on. First one was you and I left Mexico. I really loved what we were doing there, and I expected us to just honestly grow old in that place and live out our years in that ministry, right? And then we moved here to the States, and we didn't know exactly what we would do as livelihood, and ended up in the church that had supported us for a long time. But you ended up with a job there, and I ended up wanting to work alongside you, and it didn't pan out that way. And that was a painful while of wishing and thinking that it would change and working toward it being different. But I think just becoming aware of where our identities were fused in ways that I thought they had to be and maybe they needed to be. And then realizing with all the things that I think I have to offer, my sense of self-worth, I'm doing things with my hands that nobody will be able to see on the recording, but like became enmeshed with a lot of the feedback that I would get from people, and how I would feel about myself, like offering something of value and probably receiving recognition for that. Though when I look back over my history, like not always receiving recognition, but feeling like I could feel proud of what I was doing, recognition from myself, I guess. And then walking some other roads that felt similar in a way, like they thought that they would pan out with other soul work type spaces and having breakups. Soul work breakups are so painful, and they were especially more painful in that time when I think that I was looking to replace my sense of self-worth around being a missionary and what we did, not really finding that in the traditional church space and not stepping into partnership the way that I wanted to, but thinking that it was coming about with the way the soul work space was forming and then having it break apart, I experienced that really painfully. I think more so than, I can't say for sure, more so than other people that weren't finding their worth there, I guess, is what it was. But it helped me to become aware of what it was that I was wanting. And then honestly, like looking to sustaining practices with God to find that kind of acceptance and fulfillment, and then be able to come back to community and soul work spaces and church with a different stance. And it doesn't always come out this way, but you and I were talking about the grace cycle again recently. People can look that up online if they want to, but it's thinking about having a solid identity coming from God and the acceptance of God, and then having our other activity flow out of that, rather than striving to do worthy things in my activity so that I feel acceptable by God and other people. I was aware of that pattern and I thought it was a good model, but I don't think I had lived the cycle of it with such clarity before those hard seasons.
Yeah. So when you look back, and I don't know if this is something that in 2050 you can look back and see versus can you recognize today the value of those hard things, but do you see where this shows up in real time, the change that it makes in your leadership today going through those experiences?
Yeah, I think that it's a work in progress still, but I feel like when I'm in a tough space, I led a weekend this weekend, and there was, somebody there that presented unique challenges, unexpected things that she would say and do that didn't fit the mold. And I feel like I could stand in those spaces feeling confident that she was going to get what she would out of the weekend, and not having to prove that I'm smart and that I have value by making sure that she kind of comes away with a right answer perspective or falling into line without saying, I feel like I can't explain well because I don't want to tell this woman's story, but it was like surprising things that she would say and do even in the middle of a teaching, but I felt like I could just stand in my space of knowing that I'm beloved by God, that creates my sense of self-worth and value, but then I have something prepared to offer, and I can see where she is, offer a brief answer to her question or the sidetrack that she's going to take, and then also just say, you know what, we can return to that at another time. I'm still interested in talking with you about it, but we have a long way to go here. And I think in the past, I would have felt a lot more constrained by worry over how this whole thing appears, how I appear in the interaction, what her thoughts are about me and what everybody else is thinking. I get wrapped up in that sometimes, but I feel like I can distance myself from it better now than I could in the past.
Yeah. So what I think I hear you saying is you would want them to know you are smart and you are good at what you do. And so somebody throwing up questions at inappropriate times, that's what you would be concerned about.
Yeah, like winning the argument. And it wasn't even an argument, but winning in that sense. And I felt like, it's not like that doesn't occur to me at all. I don't want to look incompetent. That's never my goal. I hate that, I would hate that. But instead I can just actually spend my energy listening to what the woman is saying, and then giving a response that I think might be helpful to her or might re-explain where I'm coming from without having to convince her. I think that's the difference. It's like not having to make sure that she's on the same page as what I'm saying or something like that. That's not going to be where I need to win in order to feel successful or to feel value or importance.
I love this because I feel like that's a part of my story is I want people to believe that I know what I'm doing and that if you give me a task, I can do it well. And so if somebody challenges it in the moment, I'm very open to critique, not in front of people. But if somebody challenges me in the moment, then I feel like, oh no, everybody else here must think that too, and they must think I'm an idiot, and I can't lead from that position. So I love how you're unpacking this, that is a wonderful building block to find confidence in who God has created you to be.
Yeah, as I'm thinking about it, like while you're talking, I think that what is developing for me, and it's not that God's never intended to put this out there and I've never intended to pick it up. I just think over the years, it's actually developing a more solid core that's like an untouchable core where I feel comfort and confidence in God's love and grace. There's a place that I can rest in that's untouchable. And it's not that never gets rocked. I think that I still sometimes feel rocked in it, but I know how to go toward that. And I recognize when it's happening in ways that I didn't before.
So I wonder, and we're talking about your leadership in Crucible, but I wonder if there are other places in your life where this shows up as well.
Yeah, surely. I mean, I think it probably just shows up in everyday conversations. I hope that it shows up like in our family. I think the other night I said something that sounded short with our family, and you asked me about it, and instead of explaining it away or coming out defensive or something like that, I didn't like it, but I could sit in it. I could say, yeah, I'm sorry that I was short with everybody in that response, and own it and apologize. In that way, get to new footing with our people, our close people. But I think it would happen elsewhere too if I was outside of our family.
Yeah, I think this was one of the big lessons for me as a dad, was realizing there needed to be consistency with the kids when they were little, in public and in private. And in public, I was so aware of how I came across as a dad. And I thought my kids' obedience had to be a part of the picture so people in public we can cut all of this part.
No, I think it's good. I actually feel like it's really related because I think leadership isn't just public spaces. Like, I think we think about it publicly, but I think integral leadership is in private, even when nobody's around. And the activities that I engage in when nobody's around, or just with my children, with people that I think I'll never meet again, as well as those that I'm in a more steady relationship with, or I'm in this Crucible groups and community with, or my church. So I feel like it fits, it overflows into thinking about what living in wholeness looks like.
Yeah, there are times when I feel like sitting across from somebody having a cup of coffee, and I feel like, oh, right now I have to have the right answer. That's what they want from me, is the right answer. And whenever I can remember, that's not who I have to be. I can just ask a better question, or a question, or say the famous words, I don't know. It seems like that has more of an impact than trying to be the guy that has the right answers. And then I'm always embarrassed by that guy that showed up wanting to have the right answers.
I was thinking, I think that's a big one for me. And this hasn't come up yet in the podcast, but I think going ahead and saying something that I don't expect others will appreciate hearing, or they may not agree with, and being willing to present that anyway, that's actually been a growth edge for me, partly through painful experiences from the past. Like, oh, I'm aware now of how sometimes when I did that when I was young and got negative feedback and felt some public embarrassment around it, prevented me from doing it at times that are actually really important. And so even with the person at the weekend I'm talking about, but other people that come to mind too, being willing to say, I see that we have a different point of view and I disagree with what you're saying, but being able to just discuss it and talk about it rather than hide it, that's been a big area of growth for me.
So if you could imagine 2050 Kim looking back on 2024 Kim, what do you think would bring her a lot of joy about what's going on right now?
That's a good question. I feel stumped, actually. I don't know. I think I don't know how to answer it. And maybe that's like no forward vision for the future, but that's a little harsh on myself. I think that the way that I'm walking right now, like my personal ministries are just evolving, they're just kind of taking shape and coming about. So my hope that the 2050 Kim will actually look back on the Kim from today and feel excitement and joy at the opportunities that I stepped into. I think I already feel that, but I think that what I'll feel proud about is looking back over these years and discovering that I developed healthy patterns of balance. I was an at-home mom and involved with ministry, but it all related to my kids and family, and now I'm in a unique place where most of it doesn't, actually. And I feel sadness about that. I feel like it's weird, even that you don't know a lot of the people that I'm really close with. It's a wrestling place for me to see, like, how much time and energy do I devote outside of our family circles and the circles that you share. And I think that the woman who comes to that time of life and looks back, like, what I hope that I can feel proud about is that I stepped into that with energy and balance in a way that I stepped into the opportunities that were available without becoming a stranger in my home circles. That I still give time and energy to our family life in making home a place that stays connected even as our kids grow and are farther apart.
I think you're a really good mom. You're a really good leader. So I think you're doing this really well. Well, is there anything else that you would like to say to the interweb universe about leadership?
I'm curious who our listeners are. I'm expecting that the majority of the listeners are people engaged with Crucible, just because I think they'll be drawn to hearing these podcasts. So with the Crucible crowd, I would say if there's an avenue of leadership that you're interested in or you're passionate about within Crucible, that is actually one of Crucible's goals, is to develop leaders. And I think their hope is for leaders to develop that help sustain their projects and programs. But beyond that, their desire, I really believe this, is for what happens within the groups and weekends and spaces will overflow into the lives of men and women outside of Crucible. And that may look like leadership. It may look like service to your church and family, which I think are closely related to leadership. And then I think it may just look like feeling secure in who you are as a person, in your strengths and weaknesses, and coming into your life with all of that in front of you at the ready, so that you're not trying to overcompensate for areas of weakness, and that you're fully walking into your giftedness. So I would encourage you, to the Crucible crowd, if you're interested in leadership development, to pursue the pathways that you see available at the pace that you're able to do it. Because I stepped in at this unique time when my full-time gig was ending, naturally, with the kids graduating. And I had already begun, but I got to dedicate a lot of my time and energy to it. But even if you can't go at that quick of a pace, set some realistic goals for your life that do fit, and it's moldable in that way. So just encourage you to step into it. And people outside of Crucible, I would encourage you to find places in your life where you can live into complete honesty, and where other people are doing that too, whether it's looking for a Crucible space or just knowing, yeah, this is my people, where we're stretching ourselves to be 100% honest. We're continuing to dig deep into our own souls and look at our wounded and pained and dark motivations, and also holding space for others to do that. And I believe that those are the kind of conversations and spaces that will bring lasting support and lasting change in our own lives and in the lives of our families, our churches, and communities. That's my 2 cents.
All right, I think we have time for one question from our mailbag. This question comes in from Heather Thornton from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and she asks, how do you actively rest and create balance in your life?
It's like she's been reading my diary. How do I actively rest? I think that one of the simple ways that I have been learning and trying to establish is set working hours and set times when I'm not working, which sounds really simple, but because I'm working from home, I was giving people the availability, and I can do it any of these times. It was basically like my entire calendar. And so honoring the times when I want to be off. And then I realized my mind works this way. I have so many open projects, conversations, or tasks. It is reflected on the toolbar of my computer. Like on the web browser has like 20 open windows, but I've decided I'll power down active windows at the end of the day as a way. It's a funny practice, but it feels like a discipline to say, like, I've done all I can on this right now. I'm not going to leave it open. And I'm shutting it down in my mind too, like I'm closing it. I haven't done this, but I've thought about walking out the front door and in the back door. Maybe a Mr. Rogers shout out, like change my shoes and my sweater or something, like so that I'm like, here I am on, and now I'm going to be off. I haven't actually done that, but I've considered it. And then the other things that I do, I want to make sure things are done well, and I will give away rest time. So I have to focus more toward intention around rest, because the work stuff, I'm going to bend toward making sure that it happens. My best energy is first thing in the morning. Like sometimes I do give that time away for meetings, but I won't give all my mornings, early mornings away for meetings. I spend some of that time in quiet with God. I've been going through the Ignatian spiritual practices with Nancy Schrader, which have been phenomenal. And then I'll also just do other quiet, meditative, reading poetry and doing an art project, things that I enjoy and my soul thrives while I'm doing it, but they're not related to productivity. Sometimes cooking or something like that is like it, but because cooking is a task that we have to have happen in order to survive, it enters into a realm of drudgery sometimes, and it doesn't fit renewing. But if it's if it's something that I've set aside that's fun, then that is restful for me too.
I love all that. Thank you. And I can imagine using that knowledge of going out the front door and coming in the back. I can imagine how that may come up in future conversations. So I think that's great. Thank you, Heather, for the question in the mailbag.
Yeah, good question.
Well, it has been a pleasure to get to talk to you here. And as soon as we end this recording, we can keep conversations going. And that's what I love about doing life with you. I hope you've been blessed by today's conversation. This has been a wonderful journey. And the reason why we do this is because we want to share it with others. God bless you today.
For more information about our weekends, please go to thecrucibleproject.org. Or if you're ready to get started on your transformational journey right now, you can connect with one of our Crucible certified coaches for a free 30-minute session at thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. That's thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. If you like what you heard, connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rate and review wherever you are listening, and don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Thank you for listening.